Thanks for joining me, Patricia, from London. I'm really excited to talk about Sufism. That's how I say it, right? Sufi Islam. Okay,
Yes, Sufism, that's right. Yes.
Sufism. All right. And I guess to start with, give me a little bit of background about your journey, because that's what's so fascinating about this whole process is you grew up in Mexico as a Catholic, right? And then now you are in London and you converted to Sufism. So tell me a little bit about that process and what the journey has been like to where you are today.
Of course. Thank you for having me, Josh. I'm really excited as well. Basically, it all started. I was born and raised in Mexico as a Catholic, attended Catholic school. And around age 9 or so, it's when I began to question religion and my beliefs. And the reason being that I had a dream, and as a child, that dream was very scary for me. The dream involved like my soul like being taken, and that's when I started to question like, what does that even mean? What does a soul mean, and all of that. So around that age, I remember reading the Bible like with much more detail. Like I was just by myself reading the Bible, and then I would ask some questions to the nuns at my school and things like that. But after that, one of my cousins, they left Catholicism, and her family joined another what you call it denomination of Christianity, if
Like
I'm
an
not
evangelical
mistaken.
church or Protestant.
Exactly,
Okay.
Protestant, exactly, one of them.
Mhm.
I don't know exactly which one. So that helped me understand that you can actually live your religion, because as a child and in Mexico,
Right.
it's like nothing, you don't think about that, right? So
It's like saying you no longer like tortillas or something. It's just you can't do that. You're Mexican.
exactly. So to me,
Yeah.
it was very interesting. So I began even questioning more, and my cousin and her family, my aunt, they would invite me to the temple they would go to, and that's when I began seeing, of course, a different perspective, right? But even then, I was still not sure. I was still feeling like this is not what I feel right. So years went by. I'm talking about I was 10, 11, 12, and even though I was not sure about Catholicism anymore, I would still pray to God. I would say, God help me. I don't like feeling this confusion. It's just not a good feeling to be confused and not having answers. So I was like, please help me
Sure.
understand what am I supposed to do. And I remember praying that almost every night because I was scared. I was scared of being in that confusion. So fast forward when I was 16, um, my parents agreed that I would go to Canada to study, to learn English.
Okay.
And once I arrived in Canada, that's where it, it was like my prayers were answered because I received a world religion class in high school. And I never had a world religion class. In Mexico, they only teach you Catholicism if you're at a Catholic school.
Sure.
So that's what I started to be like, whoa, like there's more religions, and to me it was fascinating. Like I remember in that class I would always do great because every chapter was a different religion, and I really, really enjoyed it. And but more particularly when I reached Islam, for some reason, like I remember that moment when I opened the book, and it had like the picture of the Kaaba, in Saudi Arabia, and like it just said Islam and the five pillars of Islam, and it just something like I just felt something very drawn to it. And I had no idea because I never met any Muslims before that.
Sure.
So I started studying it in my class and then outside of school as well. And for about maybe about 6 months or so, I was very into studying Islam. And that would mean like I was reading the Quran, I was speaking to some Muslim friends from school. The mosque, there was a mosque right across from my high school, and I would visit it. I would just, be curious about it. And then I felt so drawn to it that I was like, I guess I better stop here because I didn't. I didn't know I could like be a Muslim really like that because you think about it, it's like, oh, that's just so different from me. I'm interested in how it is, but that's very different from making it part of your life.
Right. Especially
So
when you come from a culture that is so different.
exactly, yeah. So I was I remember a friend said, oh, you could become Muslim if you really like Islam. And I remember looking at her like I don't know how that would be. Especially the first thought that came to me was the judgment. The
Sure.
judgment from my family, society. That's right away what comes to a lot of us when we want to make such a radical change or shift. So I was like, no. So, but then I just started to, I continue going my life, but I was feeling again really drawn, and I continued to study it. And to make it a bit short, so yeah, I was already 17 by the time I was like, I don't care. Like, I don't care what my family says. This is what feels right for me. And yeah, so I became Muslim at age 17.
So that
And
still is really young, though, for someone to make such a monumental change in terms of belief and religion.
mhm,
So obviously
mhm,
that was something that was very deep in your heart that you were drawn to it. You said, okay, I'm going to do this.
yeah,
So
yeah,
did
absolutely.
you married a Muslim man, or like how did you end up in London?
Yeah, so without much planning, I've been so again, that I was 17. I was in Canada still for another 6 years. And I was the happiest there. I was practicing Islam, I was going to the mosque, I met people. And then about college age, I was about 22. I moved to Michigan. And in Michigan is where I met my husband because I was studying there. So yeah, so I got married at 24. And we lived then. That's the thing. I've been moving so much without really planning to fully. It's as if, life kind of has taken me. So then
Yeah.
from Michigan, we moved to San Diego, California. And we
All
were
right.
there
Nice.
for some years. Yeah.
I lived
And
there for a
then
year when I was a lot younger. It's a beautiful city.
oh yeah, I really liked it. It was a very nice time there. And we just moved from San Diego to London, well, to UK at the end of 2021, so it's been 3 years. And we primarily moved because my husband wanted to do a master's degree here, and I was like, yeah, sure, why not? Let's just go. So we've been here for 3 years, yeah. And
Nice.
of course, as you can imagine, in every place I've lived, I have learned different things. And yeah, I really try to enjoy whatever life takes me.
So that's a really interesting journey then, because from Canada to Michigan, then to San Diego, and now to London. I imagine that Islam is different in each of those places. So how has that been? How did you settle, or how did you discover Sufism? It seems like a very, maybe explain just a little bit about it. There's a lot of information online, so if anyone is listening to this, they're probably already aware of what Sufism is. Since I spoke to you and we scheduled this, I've read a bunch, I've watched a bunch of videos, I've learned as much as I can. It's really interesting,
Yeah.
the the focus of Sufism and the different aspects than what most people, especially most Westerners, I would say, like most Americans, most people in Latin America, maybe people in Western Europe as well, than what we would think of as Islam. And it's very different from what I experienced living in Indonesia, in Malaysia, traveling to the Middle East, etc. So, what was that like, and how did you end up at Sufism? The journey between the different, I guess, Muslim
Yeah.
communities in those places.
You're absolutely right. Every place I have been, I have seen different faces of what can people refer to as Islam. And in my experience, Islam is Sufism, and Sufism is Islam. That's how I see it. But of course, as you can imagine, and with any philosophy or religion or theology, there are different interpretations, right, of a religious text. So in Islam, there are different dimensions of understanding it according to our own level of consciousness. And I'm sure it's the same for anything we see in life, you know. But let's talk about Islam and how I came to Sufism. So in Islam, when I first became Muslim, it was just a typical, like, okay, pray 5 times a day, fast in Ramadan, the most outside, I would call it like the shell, you know. In fact, Islamic law, or what they also is known as Sharia, which has been, of course, is spoken about a lot.
Yes. It's a very
Um,
political hot button
eh,
topic, actually, that people don't really know
Absolutely.
much about, myself included. But it's like it's that one word that, like, no. But yeah.
Yes, exactly. It's that word that you use, and oh, you know. But you're right. It's very much associated with politics, and so Sharia Islamic law is that it's the rules that a Muslim would need to abide by if they want to if they want to live a life of worship to God, right? So all those rules, believe me, it has taken me many years to understand the purpose, because I'm one of those people that I don't like doing things just because they tell me. I want to understand, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I want
understand.
to, yeah. So, of course, at first they were just telling me, okay, now you're Muslim. Okay, now you just pray, now you fast and cover up, and that's it. And of course, at first I was 17, just as you said. So, as I kept growing up and questioning things, I kept discovering further and further the reason as to why these rules exist and how they would benefit me and my life, you know? So primarily I find Islam to be a beautiful religion with structure. And I have come to understand that human beings, we need a structure to some degree, because the structure discipline helps us, you know, develop further, at least. And again, there is a lot of things we can talk about regarding, like, oh, freedom and structure discipline. But at least to me, my understanding has been that in order for me to achieve the freedom of thinking and the freedom of living that I'm experiencing, I have needed that structure. I really love having to pray 5 times a day. I really love the 30 days fasting. To me, it gives like that fuel to, like, okay, this is like, it fuels my creativity, fuels my curiosity, and there are deeper reasons as to why that exists. So going back to that, yeah, I've seen different types of Muslims, different types of mosques, different types of ideologies within Muslims or Islam. um Sufism happened to me, or it came to my knowledge around 2018, after I have gone through a very, very rough and difficult time in my life, where I was not finding that benefit of religion anymore in my life. Okay. So I was in a moment where my faith was being challenged, and I was like, okay, so I believe in God. I believe He does things for a reason. And, you know, I'm believing what the Quran is telling me, that God loves me and all of that. But yet, I was faced with a test, or I was faced with an experience that I was like, no, God cannot be doing this to me. What's going on, you know?
Mm.
And at that moment, so that this experience was surpassing whatever my understanding of Islam up until then. So at that moment, I knew there was something more. I was like, okay, there has to be, because the Quran always says, like, God does not give you something beyond your capacity to deal with it. So I was
Right.
like, okay, there has to be a way for me to deal with this. And yeah, so then at that point, you know, through synchronicities, through a friend, through this and that, like, I arrived at a at a gathering that was from Sufism, and I began to understand. So from 2018 until now, I have discovered so much that, and that so much means like the purpose of pain, the purpose of whatever pain I went through, the purpose of any disappointment, or like I finally obtained those answers I was seeking through Sufism. And all Sufism is Islam, but in a way where you go deeper. You don't just stay at the five prayers or the fasting or the cover. Sufism is, why are you doing it? Like, why? Explain to me at a heart level, at your psyche level, how is this benefiting you in your day to day? And that's what I have
Hmm.
found with Sufism. Yeah.
So now is that because there are a lot of rituals, and I understand how those rituals can provide structure. I think most religions have different things that are those rituals. But I think that that's also part of the challenge in our modern day life, right? I mean, if you're traveling, for example, how do you pray 5 times a day? And there are some prayer rooms in airports or whatever, but there's certain things where it's like in every religion, it seems that we can rationalize those structures, those rituals. We can rationalize going and praying at the mosque, or we can rationalize not going to mass if someone is a Catholic, because oh well, it's this holiday, or oh I'm doing this thing with my friends or whatever. So, did you find the peace and the answers through ritual, or did you find it through more of the esoteric aspects of Sufism and in a deeper understanding? What sort of led you there?
Yeah, they would say that later because through the practice, as you say, the prayer and all of that, it helps, but it only helps as much as you, again, give it a meaning and understand why you're doing it. So before I was doing it again because I was told that okay, if you're a Muslim, we pray 5 times a day or we fast. Like that's what being a Muslim is about. But rarely there was a more in-depth understanding of how's that going to help me when I'm facing a challenge like this,
Sure.
where it was challenging my faith. So
Why do we do this? Is it just do it because God said to do it, or is there a deeper meaning? What does that mean? Right?
yeah, so in Sufism, and again, the thing here that I would love for anyone who might listen to catch, and even Muslims themselves, because I have encountered a lot of Muslims who are against Sufism. Why? Because they are not. Um, they don't perceive how there is a need to go this deep, or there is a need to like see the esoteric meaning, and a lot of people might start thinking, oh, that's a deviation, that's a different thing from what the prophet said. But in reality, I mean, the prophet was always, he was never just saying do this, do that, do that, like for a lot of people, because clearly there was different levels of understanding. In any group of people, you're going to have different levels of understanding. So
Sure.
my experience is that through the prayers, through the rituals, or through the fasting, it's as if it slowly helps you open up to another level of, like, and by level I don't mean, oh, I'm better than others or this. No, by level I mean, like,
Right.
like the how deep you can go. And all Muslims understand that the Quran has different levels of understanding. That's something we all know.
Mhm.
So those levels, I think, are tied to Sufism, and how Sufism can always try to answer that question, that what wounds are inside you that might prevent you or are disconnecting you from the divine or from God.
Sure. Why do you think that is? That's really beautiful. That looking deeper, and that's really at the heart of why I'm so curious about this topic and why I wanted to start this podcast, because what you said is really profound. There are many Muslims who just kind of want to go through the motions. And so it's almost like religion, and I've seen this I'm not attacking Islam for sure. This is very much the case with Christians, as with many
Mm-hmm.
religions.
Mm-hmm.
We want to, go to eternal life, for example. We want to go,
Mm-hmm.
people want to go to heaven or whatever it is. And so they're going to do basically the bare minimum in order to do that. But everything else gets rationalized. And why is it that people don't want to go deeper? Like, what is the most important aspect of our journey as humans in this life, if not the spiritual? And if you're
Mm-hmm.
going to have a framework that you live your life by, it's important to know why, isn't it? Like, why do you think that
Yes.
people are we live in a secular society. We live in a modern society. There's so many things that distract us and draw our attention, but
Hmm.
yet that longing is within everyone. Well,
That's
why do you
right.
think people don't pursue that on a deeper level? Well, why am I praying 5 times a day? What does that really mean, and how can I go deeper with this? Why wouldn't someone want to do that?
I would say my experience is because it hurts. It really hurts to go deeper. And we obviously run away from pain. But again, this is the illusion. We keep believing that no, if I go deeper, it's going to hurt. And we all feel at some level if I go deeper, because going deeper also involves, getting to know yourself more.
Yeah,
And that's the part that most human beings run away from. That's why the distractions, that's why I prefer to keep scrolling or go here, go there, because why would I sit down with myself and ask me, oh, why did this trigger me? Why did so and so, bother me? Like, it hurts
yeah,
to be in that position. So in fact, in Sufism, there is a very common say that whoever knows themselves knows their Lord, because that's the premise. In order to go deeper, it's deeper within yourself. That's what it actually means. And basically, that's the problem. That who would want that when you can be, I don't know, traveling or spending time somewhere else? Even though once you start doing that, it's like I find it's the most pleasurable thing ever. Like that no money can buy, nothing else can match that pleasure to keep understanding your motivations. It's like other worlds open up.
absolutely. That's one of the things that I was, or that I learned in my exploration of Sufism the last few weeks, was that one of the big parts of it is the dissolution of the ego, and
Hmm.
the goal of sort of going within and finding out yourself and setting that aside in order to connect back with God.
Hmm. Yeah.
Has that been something that you have found to be really true in your experience, and how has that helped you just in life in general to go through that process?
Yeah, and again, I reiterate, it has been painful, but it has been extremely rewarding. And how has that happened is that, again, since this experience in around 2017, I started noticing that my discontent with that experience was based on the fact that it was completely against what my ego wanted. It was completely against what I had always thought that I wanted, because whatever experience that was, it was challenging me to look at myself and be like, who are you without this thing? Who are you? Who are you without obtaining this thing you want? And I had no answer. I had no answer whatsoever. I was like, no, I'm literally nothing without this thing I want. And
You mean an
that's not.
external thing, like a
Yeah,
material thing,
exactly.
or a
An
position or
external.
status?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. Absolutely. So when I was challenged with, you cannot get this, I was like, God, like, this must be a mistake. Why wouldn't I be able to get this? And at that point,
Mm.
I realized, wow, this is crazy. Like, because I never in my life imagined I would be the one saying God made a mistake.
Mhm.
Because again, my own self-concept was, oh, like, I pray, I fast, I'm a good Muslim. That's my own self-concept. That was my own self-concept. And a lot of us have lots of blind spots, until you get challenged or tested or whatever you want to call it, with an experience that it goes to your ego and be like, no, like, the ego is like, no, you must have this, because how can you not have it? So as you say, yeah, throughout these years, it's been a lot of work, um when it comes to my ego, and distinguishing what's my it's about aligning. This is what I have found with Sufism. It's about aligning my wishes with God's wishes, because in Sufism it's taught that, if I mean in Islam, but in Quran you have different references to, like, if you submit to God, and by submission it means God has a plan, right, for each person, and each person is alive for a reason. So a lot of us are not sure sometimes why are we alive, or as you know, I used to volunteer for people with suicidal ideation that they didn't understand why should I continue on, you know. And when we are faced with those moments, it's when you have to really go deep and be like, no, I'm alive for a reason. And that's what I keep holding on to, you know. and
Yeah.
and the more I have been able to distinguish my ego from what God wants from me, I have honestly been able to integrate what God wants for me and that desire that I knew I had deep down, but it was covered by ego or wounds or trauma or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, I don't know if I answered the question.
Yeah, well, it's a very deep issue. I mean, to examine, and I think that the ego is such a challenging part of our human existence for everyone, and everything in this
Mhm.
modern world feeds that. And it's not
Yes,
simply that
exactly.
it's a distraction, but whether it's status or whether it's how many likes we get on a social media post or how much money we have or what our job is or whatever those things are,
Mhm.
they they're a part of our existence as humans. And yet they're not. Anyone who's religious at all is going to admit that, well, yeah, this is, this world is not my home. I'm going to the,
Mhm.
eternal life
Mhm.
afterwards. Well, then why not focus on that, right? And that's what I found so interesting about Sufism is that it's looking for that reconnection with God. So with you finding that and going through those challenges and not getting that thing you wanted that was external, but being able to go deeper and go through the pain and reconnect with God, how has that helped you? And how do you think, I guess, for other Muslims who are maybe just going through the motions, who are just doing the thing
Mhm.
because it's law, right?
Mhm.
I grew up in a very, very strict Christian household. So there was a lot of legalism. It's like,
Mhm.
you do this and you don't do this. Why?
Mhm.
Because this is the way it is. This is the way you're supposed to. But that doesn't make sense. Like, I want to know why.
Mhm.
And if
Yeah.
you at least explain to me, it's like, well, if you do this, then it's going to disconnect you from God, or it's going to hurt you, or it's going to hurt
Mhm.
God, or
Yeah.
whatever. If there's consequences. Okay, I can understand that.
Mhm. Mhm.
But how do you think? I mean, you've done this. You've been able to overcome sort of the external and be willing to go through the pain. How would you recommend to other people that are just going through the motions who are Muslims be able to do that? Like, what's the secret?
You know, sadly, I would dare say that it's not until humans are faced sometimes, because we don't like to pay heed or to go deep when we are living a good life. When everything is going well, it's very hard to get or snap out of that and be like, oh, okay, wait, let me go deeper.
Because
But I
God
would
is
say,
blessing us, so obviously
yeah,
we're doing a great job spiritually, right? We use the
absolutely.
external to justify.
You point to a great thing. I want to say that that's the thing. A lot of people, including me, we were saying like, okay, why is God doing this to me? We always, if faced with a challenge like this, why is God doing this to me? So we tend to ask, why, when I have been good or I have been praying, I have been fasting? Why? So we take this stance of God owes me because
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing good. He needs to pay me with blessings, or he needs to pay me with things that I want. And that's actually, I think, the mentality of most people. And that was why I was hurt at that experience, because I was like, wait, I left my life, I became Muslim, I did this, I did that, and this is what you're giving me, you know? So this ego, when it challenges God, and now I look back and believe me, there's not a day really that goes by that I thank God for that challenge, because it opened my eyes in ways I don't think I could have ever opened. And what I mean by this, that going back to your question, we all are going to face in one way or another moments, right, in our life where we might feel lonely, where we might feel betrayed, or I don't know, anything. Sad, depressed, depends, right? I think every single person, it is my belief and the belief of Islam, that every human will have a chance to connect to God. And maybe because in my experience it was through difficulties, but it doesn't have to be. That's the thing. It's about like if you're living a good life, okay, ask yourself, okay, why? Why am I having all these blessings? Why am I having wealth? Why am I having health? What am I supposed to do with my health? Am I really just sitting on the couch and eating, or is that why health is for? So you can ask yourself, why do I have all these wonderful things? What can I do to give back to society, or to feel fulfilled in a way? I think the key is always asking ourselves how fulfilled I am, because each person's path is very unique. So my path will be very different perhaps from another person that loves Sufism and practices Sufism, or another Muslim or a Christian, whatever. There will be similarities, of course, but every step is very unique. And it's about always trying to check in, okay, why am I fulfilled? Does this fulfill me? Yes. Or this doesn't fulfill me? Okay, why am I in this situation that's not fulfilling? Because just as you mentioned, like, we live in this world that keeps just catering to the ego. But at the end of the day, having the ego satisfied is not a sign of being fulfilled, because the ego does not have a stop. The ego will always want more and more. You give a person wealth, they will want more and more and more. And the ego will always want more. And then if left unchecked, we are just these greedy people that starts doing things to get more and more. And what are we doing with that? So I think it's always about keeping in check our motivations. That has really helped me a lot, and I think it can help many people.
That makes sense. The one thing I think that gets confusing
Mm-hmm,
um, is when you have the idea of, okay, so I need to go within, I need to overcome the ego. The ego is a tool like anything else, so it can be a good thing. It can help you with
yeah.
confidence and going and doing something, speaking in public or whatever. But
Mm-hmm,
it
mm-hmm,
can also obviously be to our detriment if the ego is running things. And
mm-hmm,
so if going within and setting that aside and then reconnecting with God, if we realize, well, this is all there is this connection with God. Like, how I think that there's it can become confusing, because then it's like, well, if I don't have an individual purpose, then why
mm-hmm,
am I even here? If I'm just supposed to be connecting with God, then maybe I should go be a monk. And I think this is
mm-hmm,
one of the things that a lot of people struggle with. I've questioned this when I was younger. It's like, but there's all these wonderful, enjoyable things. And I see lots of people who serve God having this
mm-hmm,
wonderful life. Aren't we supposed to have our family and friends and have a good time and be healthy and be wealthy, all of these things?
mm-hmm.
Am I supposed to go be a monk, or am I supposed to go just be whatever it is in different religions?
Mm-hmm.
That I think is a real challenge to come to grips with.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I also, of course, battled with that for a few years. And I have come to understand something really beautiful, that in the past I was also like that. Like, I was like, in fact, now as a kid I wanted to be a nun. And then I wanted, because
Interesting.
I thought, okay, if I'm attracted to the life of spirituality, then it must mean that I have to be some sort of religious servant or something like that.
Right, right, yeah.
but but no, reality is we all came with a different set of talents, different set of abilities, right? You could be a baker, you could be a business person, you could be someone who is a janitor or a cleaner or a cook. Like, it doesn't matter really. It's about how connected, because we can connect to God through this world, through the ego, just as you say. Like, the ego just needs to be tamed in a way that's serving you, and there are so many things that I have learned in the past few years about this in particular. Because for many years I was confused, like, okay, what should I be then? Like, if I'm very drawn to the spiritual, does that mean I should be secluded? Does that mean I need to just go far away? But no, I was able to understand that I'm meant to be full in this world, and a lot of us, majority of us, need to integrate the life of this world with the spiritual life, because if we don't, then we risk living. You know what? Many people want to escape either their problems or things like that, and escapism is not what we are trying to do here. We're trying to integrate this world. Like, okay, are you a teacher? Are you a worker? Are you this? And serving people or serving society, or doing whatever you want to do, but understand, is this really what I want to do, or is it because society or pressure or my family or whoever? I think that's the big difference, because in the past, even when I studied like college, I was like, oh, I'm going to study business because my dad, like, I just wanted to please my family here and there. And then as I kept growing up, I'm like, no, but what really, really drives me and what really gives me passion is like psychology, spirituality. So let me, and sometimes you may be able to do many things, and society wants you to just have one job title, just one profession, just one tag, what? No, you can do as many things as you are called to do. But it's about that calling, and it's that calling that really makes all the difference, I think.
Yeah, and that's where we find the lessons, right? Because
Yeah.
if we have a purpose for our lives,
Hmm.
escaping that to, like you say, like the escapism from problems to go and just be spiritual, that can be an ego thing too. Whereas the
Exactly.
reality
Yeah.
is maybe we should go through those challenges and have those difficult times and really pursue our purpose in order to learn the lessons that we're here to learn in order to become closer to God. How would you recommend for younger people? Because you were able to do something, and as you know, my wife Gabriela is Mexican, and so I
Yes.
have gotten integrated with Mexican culture much more over the last few years, and I
Hmm.
understand how strong that cultural bond is
Hmm.
and the cultural norms. So
Hmm.
I'm sure, and actually, yeah, in other cultures around the world, there are similar sort of frameworks for you're part of this family, this is how we are, and this is what you're going
Hmm.
to do, whether you want to or not. How would you recommend young people who feel that calling, as you did at a very young age, toward the spiritual, toward God, and that's in their heart and it's that desire, but that maybe they grew up in a secular family, or maybe they're, as you did, their interest and their calling toward God is different from the religious framework that their family is. Like, what advice would
Hmm.
you give to a young person who's like, I know that this is like deep and I know I have to do this, but I don't know what to do because my family's not going to approve, my culture's not going to approve. What do I do?
Yeah, honestly, it's very tough. Let's validate that it's not gonna be very easy, but certainly what I would recommend, what I believe I did and truly helped me greatly is um, understand that all the fears that come up, all the fears of rejection, like they will reject me or they will judge me, they will this, they will that. Like, it's such a high price to pay when we keep living like that. It's a huge, huge price to pay when we keep living in this life of, I'm not gonna do what my calling is because I don't want to displease this person or my family or this or that. So, I mean, I kept listening to, of course, my intuition, my calling, but it didn't come overnight. Obviously, it's perfectly normal to be confused for a few years. In fact, it's part of the process, because being confused means you're trying to integrate both, right? You're calling for spirituality and this world, the material world, that's calling you and pressuring you to be something else. So yeah, of course, I was confused as well for many years. And when I speak to other Muslims that are young, a lot of them say, I'm confused. I'm confused. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. confusion is a big sign that your calling is not aligned with what the society or family or whoever is asking you, you know. So it's very important to take it easy, to be kind on ourselves, which was something I was not fully aware of. um, and just try to go with the best of what you know how to navigate the situation. As we go along, we keep learning new tools, we keep meeting people that help us along the way, but it's a matter of just remaining as patient as possible with the process and not trying to rush the confusion to end.
And what role does community play in that, especially for younger people? Is there,
Mhm.
I mean, obviously we're all very connected online now, people all around the world, and so there can be risks of that, but also benefits of that, of finding
Mhm.
community, whether it's online or in your local area, etc. Like, does that play a big role, do you think? And what are some of the pitfalls that people need to look out for? Because, for example, in your journey, you were in
Mhm.
Canada, then you were in Michigan, then San Diego, now in London.
Mhm.
The communities, I imagine, are very different. And so
Mhm.
how did you
Mhm.
navigate that? How would you give advice to a younger person who is are themselves navigating this issue of, well, I need to find community. I want someone to give me feedback and help me along this journey, etc.
Yeah. Well, it is my belief again that every person has their own journey, right? So sometimes meeting people that might give you feedback that maybe hurts you or maybe it's not helpful to you at the moment for whatever reason, that's part of the process too. So, for example, whatever a person might be, try to engage with the community of where you are because community does help definitely. Community is something we all should strive to belong to. Now, again, if we're not in a position where we can fully discern, like, okay, this community is beneficial for me or not, that's the problem, right? If we're young, like I was, like I would just keep going to certain communities, but I was not feeling anything good really, but I was just going because for the sake of going, right? So now, if I give advice to that younger me, I'll be like, okay, it's fine. Like, does it resonate with you what they are saying, what they're discussing? Like the people you are talking to, do they resonate with you? And probably the younger me would say not really, or I don't know, I don't know. And it's okay not to know it because we're all at different places, but I think it's very important not to isolate. A lot of young people, I'm finding more and more, they're isolating because of the reasons like this. They say, oh, why am I going to go to the mosque or this or that? They don't understand me, they don't this, they don't that. And again, yeah, uh, I can understand that, but I always approach life with this curiosity mindset of like, okay, what can I learn? Let me go, let me listen to the lecture, let me listen to whoever is speaking. Maybe I'm gonna learn something, whether from them or from a person I'm gonna talk to, from anything. We can always learn something. And if we go with that mindset of let me see what I can learn that's gonna benefit my path, I always find answers wherever I go.
That's really good. Yeah, and the risk of isolation is for sure when there's confusion, or when, I mean, I went through that as well in my life of, well, I'm just going to figure this out on my own. Like, obviously it's me and God, and I don't like what these people are telling me, and I don't like the judgment from this
Mm-hmm.
group, and I don't agree with this, so I'm just going to figure it out myself. And that
Mm-hmm.
makes it more challenging, probably. Yes, it's important, we have to do that as well. Even if we have a community, we can't just believe whatever they tell us, or
Yeah,
we have to
yeah,
go within and do the inner difficult work, as you said.
yeah.
But that's a really great way to approach it. Is, I'm going to go learn, and I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
listen, and then I'm going to connect that and contrast that, compare it with what I know about the Quran
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
what I believe, if it doesn't make sense, well, there might be some lesson that I can learn from that. But if, maybe there's a lot of things, or maybe there's nothing, but I'm going to go with an open mind and listen to that. I think
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
I think that's really important. The biggest challenge that I see in the West for Islam, and I would
Mm-hmm.
love to get your opinion on this, is that it's very politicized. And
Mm-hmm.
so someone, I mean, it's fascinating because you live this on your journey from all through North America and now to the UK. I mean, those are the hotbed areas, I think, of Islam being politicized. So, not to get too deep into the weeds on the political side of it, but how did you navigate that? Being part of these societies that, in many ways, a lot of people are, they will just immediately make a judgment because you are Muslim. They won't look any deeper. They don't realize that there's a lot of different types of Islam, and that especially in America, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
there is some definite stereotypes about it, and some immediate judgments and rejections, etc., which obviously are not a good thing in any way. But there's reasons, I think, that some people can use to justify why they look at it a certain way. So, how did you navigate that, and how should societies, I guess, well, like for an example, in the U.S.,
Mm-hmm.
how can we overcome those stereotypical judgments to say, well, wait, but there are actually billions of people who are genuinely seeking God and worshiping God, and this is the way that they do that. How
Mm-hmm.
can we live together and love each other and just agree that, well, this is your way, this is my way, cool, we're good, you know?
Yeah, that's absolutely wonderful question to explore because that has always been my quest as well. But to be very honest with you, throughout the years I lived in Canada, in US, and now here, I have felt extremely blessed, and I also question it. I have been extremely blessed to I never really encountered anyone who looked down on me or judged me. And I think I got the answer as to why. I had close friends who did have very, very difficult experiences as Muslim with other people. And a story, one in San Diego, a friend of mine, like they got the hijab ripped at a parking lot, things like that. But
Wow.
again, speaking about my personal experience and why I don't think um, I may have encountered that. Well, again, of course, I feel very blessed. I always, no matter where I've gone, I have been able to make friends from different backgrounds. And I believe, you know, we all have this intuition, right? We all human beings have more so connected than others, but I have personally have always loved any people that is willing to be curious or at least not judge right away. We all, and that's the thing, we need to acknowledge that all of us have our own judgments in a way, right? And it's important to acknowledge them, distinguish. So, for example, I personally, whenever I used to live in a neighborhood with primarily a lot of white people. So at first I was like, if they see me walking, maybe they'll judge me, or maybe they'll look down at me, or maybe something, right? So I was afraid for a moment. Then I thought, like, okay, I'm getting this from the news, like, or from what I heard here, what I heard there, what I heard there. My experience has not been like that. Why does it have to change? And in life we cannot go just with fears, like. So I would
Yeah.
go out, I would walk. I made great friends. We had great talks. And I think my disposition was also helpful in the sense that I let go of that fear of like they will judge me. And I was like, no, we're all human beings. We all have that humanity in common. And if anyone is curious, great. And but I also I just don't like to ever judge anyone based on their religion or their path, because I am fully aware, I mean fully aware throughout all these experiences, that God really loves everyone and their path might look very different. And again, Islam emphasizes that, Sufism emphasizes that. So I have seen that clearly. And And sorry, so I have navigated that through not allowing these fears to take over me and not isolating myself from communities that are not Muslim, for example.
Because fear is a judgment as well, right?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
exactly. So again, in my experience, I have not come across anything uh, hurtful, like anyone, doing anything to me. Of course, online, that's a different. Like that's why I don't even read like much
Yeah.
of this stuff that happens online because it hurts me, and I'm like, no, I prefer
It's
not to.
very, very different for sure. That's my experience as well around the world, and that's one of the things that's so frustrating is that everywhere I have gone, like 99% of the planet, probably more, we just see each other as humans. We don't
Hmm.
have these stark divisions. It's you get the politicians and you get the media and you get all of these things that are saying these people bad, these people good,
Yeah.
and they stir up all of this anger and this fear and the shame and all of these things
Yeah.
that then causes emotions in people. It causes that fear. But the
Hmm.
reality is, I mean, nearly everyone we meet, we just want, like, we all kind of want the same thing. So whether I'm in
Yeah.
Africa or Asia or India or Latin America, like, I found that people just, they want to have, something to do. They want to have a purpose, a job, a career, etc. that they
Hmm.
like. They want to have time with their family. They want to be at peace. They want to feel safe. Like, they want to be
Hmm.
healthy. We
Hmm.
all kind of just, we want to be free to be human and to learn and all of these things. That's why I think it's really important, this internal journey, this spiritual journey, this seeking of God, to make it real as opposed to just going through the motions. And tell
Hmm.
me what you think
Yeah.
about this. But my view is that if we're just going through the motions, then God is not necessarily the focus. Our external lives are the focus. But if we are
Hmm.
genuinely seeking from the heart to know God in whatever way that is, whatever faith, whatever religion,
Hmm.
that's going to make it much easier then to be perceptive and to be
Hmm.
able to filter a lot of the fear and the lies that we're being told about the division or why we should be divided.
Hmm.
And it will give us tools that we don't even realize until we really go down that spiritual path to navigate modern day life, right?
Absolutely. No, you are 100% right on that. And that's my experience too. Like the more I have really tried to focus on doing or thinking even in a way that to the best of my knowledge is pleasing to God. Because again, like judging people is not pleasing to God. I know. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
again, it just going like we can always only see a tiny bit of what's going on in that life, in that human life.
Right.
um and just as you say, yeah, it's the more I have been able to understand and to discern, okay, these are my fears, which again, the ego is that, the ego is fears, the ego is all of those wounds that, okay, because I don't want to be rejected, I'm gonna do this. So again, as you said, most of us are so entangled and busy with this, like how to manipulate my life, how to do everything so I don't have to feel this pain of rejection or judgment or abandonment or whatever, and we just spend countless amounts of energy and focus on what do I say so this person likes me, or what do I. And then you just I used to be. That's why I back like in my early 20s, or yeah, my early 20s, I had a lot of anxiety because I felt like, okay, it was a constant, what do I do so I don't have to face or feel these pains, this pain. And then now it's like you live so much more lighter when you let go of that. And again, it's not overnight, right? But when you focus on like, okay, God, I really want to use the abilities you have given me in order to just do what I'm supposed to do in my life, which you don't have to know right away what you're supposed to do, but you keep discovering it, you
It's a
know?
journey.
It's a journey. And again, this past 7 years, it's when I have been able to get more of those answers that I was looking for in my early 20s or even teenage years, that I wanted those answers right away, but they didn't come until now, you know?
It takes time. You
Yes.
mentioned anxiety. What role, if any, does shame play in Sufism? Because and people will disagree with me, but I see in Christianity and in Catholicism that there is a hefty dose of shame in that,
Mm-hmm.
well, you're born a sinner, and you need to constantly be repenting, etc. Which is, that's one way to go internal and maybe work with the ego in a little bit different framing of that journey. But shame is a big part of many world religions. Does it play a role in Sufism, and is that connected to the anxiety, or is it something where there's not that sense of you're born a horrible person and everything you have to do, the reason you have to go pray is because you're such a horrible person and you have to constantly be repenting and changing to get closer to God? Like, is that,
Yeah.
how does Sufism look at that topic, I guess? Because shame is a big thing
Mm-hmm.
in religion. And personally, I find that shame is not a real high frequency, and I don't see how that would be
Mm-hmm.
productive in connecting to God. But every religion uses it in a different way. So
Absolutely. Oh gosh, yeah. So, well, Islam and Sufism, we are born free of sin. That's the belief. You're born free of sin.
interesting.
Um, and you acquire sin based on the nature of the world. It's impossible to be in this world without sinning. That's the belief. Now, what Islam teaches is that for as long as you are in this world, which is called the lowest world, because in Islam we believe that this is the lowest of the worlds, and there are like above, more above.
Okay.
Um, so while you are in this world, which is it prompts you to sinning, there are tools to help you reduce those moments of sin. Now, what does sin mean in Sufism and Islam? Is it's like rupture of consciousness, because we are supposed to, if we use those tools that Islam gives us and Sufism gives us, we would be connected to God like in a more so constant basis. But our sinning is correlated to that rupture of consciousness or that rupture in that connection. So it's perfectly normal that being raised in a household, and yeah, Sufism says this a lot, like we all have wounds. It's inevitable to grow up without wounds. Doesn't matter what parents or caregivers we got, there will be a way one way or another that we acquire wounds, right? So those woundings, of course, shame is a big one. Codependency or sorts of things that we acquire, and because we don't yet have the tools as a child, most of us, to deal with those situations, then once you reach a moment that you are like, okay, I'm not going to be a victim anymore, I have the capacity to deal with this. And see, this is something I see a lot, of course, in all religions. I mean, different people I've met, but in Islam in particular, it saddens me a lot, how a lot of cultures, a lot of different Muslims that belong to different cultures, Southeast Asia, or whatever you call it, due to the generational trauma they have had, they have confused Islam with their culture. So a lot of them I have
Mm,
seen, they have this mentality of like, oh no, this is the life God gave me, and that's it. I just have to be patient, and I cannot better my circumstances. A lot of them believe that no, this is my destiny, I cannot better my life, and I have to go through this painful situations, right? And that's actually totally opposite, really, of what Islam says. But I think the reason why a lot of people have stayed with that mindset, again, it's due to trauma, due to those wounds that have not been addressed. And shame is just as you described. Like I was shamed, within Catholicism too. Like, oh, you you need to pray because you raise your voice at your mom or this and that. You need to ask forgiveness. That's used in every religion of see, I think, because it's a
Yeah.
human nature to use shame to control. So
Yeah.
yeah, in Islam, I have met a lot of friends that were born and raised Muslim, and they have the same narrative of like they feel like they're a sinner and God cannot really give them grace because they're so dirty, so far away from God, that how can they dare believe that God has something good for them in their life, you know? So this narrative keeps them stuck in this like, oh no, I'm in darkness and that's it. Like I'm just gonna live this torment or this anxiety or this poverty or this, and they don't really connect to Islam in a way of like, no, you have the tools to get out of this, you know.
And what role does grace play in that? You mentioned grace, and that's obviously in Christianity a big part of it. And that grace, that forgiveness in the
Mm.
Christian framework comes from Jesus sacrificing himself on the cross, etc. In Islam, where does that grace come from?
Yeah, honestly, it comes from God Himself, because everything God has created and given us in the belief of Islam is out of His grace, and the fact that we don't understand sometimes how bad things happen, and by quotes I mean like sometimes we in our own life perceive something as bad, but in reality it turns out to be wonderful a few years down the road, that without that horrible experience, you know, you wouldn't have uh, I don't know, learn something very, very valuable. So that's something I would love for more Muslims to connect to, because it is in Islam. And in fact, every verse, not every verse, every chapter of the Quran opens up with, in the name of God, the most merciful, the most compassionate. Every single one opens up with that. Yet, when you may attend Islamic lectures or anything like that, I have noticed that a lot of the emphasis is placed on the punishment. If you don't do this, this bad thing will happen to you. You
Yeah,
know, and it's that same
fear.
narrative. Yeah, the fear of like you shouldn't be doing this. Quran says don't do this. If you do this, this terrible thing happens. And again, that fear, to me, it did horrible things. Like from Catholicism and then Islam, like I realized that I cannot connect to God through that. And there has to be another way. So the more I keep connecting to His mercy and His grace, and to thank Him for those challenges He has given me that have turned to be wonderful, truly wonderful things, I have opened myself more up to His grace, as in like I feel it, you know, it's like, okay, I feel how He's blessing me in every instance, like even being here with you, you know, or being able to discuss this, or something as simple as like I was ill like a couple weeks ago and I couldn't breathe properly because my sinuses, and just the breath, how we take it for granted, you know, like all those things we take for granted. And but Islam emphasizes so much how merciful God is. And I notice that most people forget that. Most people don't connect to that. If we were to connect to that, I don't think there would be so much shame or so much that feeling of anxiety, anguish, desperation of like, oh, I made this sin. Now how can I move on? You know? And that's
Yeah.
why so many people sadly end up terminating their lives or end up doing even worse things because they're not connecting to that grace that is available to all of us.
Do you think there's been a distortion in Islam? Because, as you said, Islam is Sufism and Sufism is Islam. There seem
Hmm.
to be many sects or divisions in Islam, as there are in every religion. But the ones that get the attention
Hmm.
are not the aspects or not the components of Islam that are preaching the
Hmm.
mercy and the grace and the love and the peace, but it's more of the warring elements, more of that extreme. At least these are the ones that get the attention, but also sometimes they get attention with good reason. Do you think that over the last, you know, 500 years or 900 years, because originally Sufism was part of Islam, correct?
Correct. Yeah,
Or
that's
it was the
that's
foundation of Islam.
yeah, it was simply what the prophet would do. Back when the prophet brought Islam through revelation, there was no such word as Sufism because it was implied. It was part of everything he would do and how he taught it. If you ask non-Sufi Muslims now, like Sufism, they will be like, "Oh, that's a deviation again. That's a distortion." And again, just as you say, like there is this back and forth, and the question is so beautiful because God says in the Quran, had he wished, he would have made one community. Had he wished, it would have been just one community, and there wouldn't be any of these issues of back and forth and this sex divisions and that. But I think the wisdom behind all of these differences or distortions or whatever you want to call them is that they really prompt us to go deep into, okay, why does this exist, what are they preaching, what are they teaching. It's about contemplating, because Quran again mentions a lot of like contemplation. If you think about it, he gave us a faculty of thinking, which a lot of people tend to not really utilize when it comes to religion. They might just be like, oh, I was born and raised in this sect or this denomination or this,
Yeah.
and no integration into that faculty of like, okay. And Quran has a lot of examples of prophets whose fathers were not Muslim. And when we say Muslim in the Quran, it's monotheist, like people that would just look up to one God rather than polytheism, for example. So they would defy, like prophets would tell the parents, okay, I'm sorry, I'm not going to follow your path because I rather be a Muslim or one that submits to one God. So yeah, and it's that challenge that not because I was born into one thing, I don't have the ability to think and observe, like, is this the right path for me? I think that's what God really wants us to address, no matter what religion.
Where do you see Sufism going over the next 5, 10, 50 years? Like, where do you see the future of religion in general, but specifically with Sufism?
I would say, you know, I believe more people would start questioning these things because, as you may notice, a lot of changes in the world have happened very quickly, like in the
Yes.
past, I don't know, 10, 20 years, whatever. The changes, the pace has been quicker, quicker, quicker. And I don't think it's sustainable for human beings to keep going at this pace without integrating spirituality into their life.
Mm.
It's not really sustainable because so many changes cannot just be processed at an intellectual level alone. So that's why I believe that whether it is Sufism or another, tool for spirituality, but for Sufism itself, I would say that more Muslims would start to realize that Sufism is Islam and it's just a matter of integrating their soul into their practices and not just going with the emotions or the flow of what they've been told to do, and to actually question, right? Like, how is this helping me? I think there'll come a point soon, maybe. More and more people are starting to realize this, and yeah, again, with all these changes, I believe it can increase.
Do you think that there will be a crash between Sufism and, for example, transhumanism? As you mentioned, the intellectual aspect, but with transhumanism, it takes it even a step further to where, oh, well, we're just going to upload our consciousness to a robot and we're going to live forever, completely rejecting the idea of spirit and
Mm.
soul. That's not, for transhumanists, they don't care about that. They care about the material world. And that is really, as I see it, that's at the underpinning of everything that is happening with our technological advancements and whatnot in the world today. But there's a
Mhm.
very strong sort of transhumanist
Yeah.
philosophical framework behind it. How do you think
Yeah.
Sufism will react with that?
Well, as in every moment of history, there will be um, moments where, in fact, we're gonna lose more Muslims, I think, because, and by losing Muslims, I say that because more people will get confused. There'll be more confusion. And in fact, it came to my mind, there is a narration by the Prophet Muhammad who said that Islam started as something strange and it's going to end as something strange as well. Because more and more people might believe that either, okay, this technology is not aligning with these old traditions and these things that religions say. So they will,
Right.
as you said,
We've
like they
moved
will,
past it. We've
yeah.
advanced beyond it. Right.
Exactly. They believe it's like not together. And it's sad because I feel as humans, we all, no matter where we come from, what we believe, we need a moral compass, right? We need beliefs. We need to understand limits as to where does this start, where does this end begin, in order to preserve ourselves and society, right? So it's hard to say for sure, but at least in the past maybe that I have observed from when I became Muslim 2006 to now, there has been an increase, a spike in people seeking spirituality. I have perceived that,
Yes,
at least within Muslim communities. I think in other communities as well.
for sure.
But now I think, of course, we're gonna face new challenges, different challenges, and it's up to each of us to understand our moral compass and to discern. Okay, this I don't know, AI or technology, like how does Islam approve of it? And there can be many situations where it's perfectly okay because Islam is never against the actualization of the human being or innovation at a technological level. It's never against that, so long as it's not harming, right, human beings or society. Like, as you know, like in many societies, for example, their fertility rate is going down rapidly. A lot of
Yes.
them are isolating, no more marriage, no more this. Like, you need to preserve society in a way, and the values and all of that. So it's a very careful balance game as to what new advancements will really benefit us, our spirituality, our life, and society, and which ones might just be plainly harmful or evil,
Yeah, and where does Islam find that line? For example, in Christianity, there's
Mhm.
I think for most people who are serious about their faith, they see a point in time with technology where if Elon Musk says you have to get a chip in your brain and it's going to have the number 666 on it, well, no, I'm not going to do that. So that for many Christians, they would say that that's the mark of the beast, not going to do it.
Mhm. Mhm.
Is there something like that in Islam in terms of technology, in terms of a red line that just, you know, we'll use it as a tool up to a point, but then no more because now it becomes something that is in opposition to what God would want for us to do?
Yeah. And you see, that's why in Islam we have what we call jurists, who are people that are specialized in providing what's called a fatwa, or a religious ruling, with anything new that keeps coming up.
Okay.
So, for example, yeah, in the past, let's say if a couple was not able to conceive and they had to do IVF or something like that, technology, they are in charge of saying, okay, yeah, it is allowed because this is and this, or with these conditions, whatever. So they are in charge of deducing the point, because if they leave it to more commoners like us, there's a huge risk of, like, I'm gonna say yes, you might say no, and then the community is gonna be even worse split.
Yeah.
And even then, of course, there will be certain differences, right, of opinion of the deducing the laws. But nevertheless, most of the time, the jurists, even if they come from different schools of thought within Islam, most of them tend to agree on a lot of aspects. Some are, of course, more conservative than others, and then it's up to the Muslim practice person that practices Islam to decide, like, okay, this is too conservative, maybe for me, and I believe that this won't harm me or this won't harm this. So they can choose from those jurists which one resonates more with them.
Okay. So there is sort of a leadership in the faith and the religion that then will look at those things and say if it's harmful or not in terms of technology.
Yeah, because they do need to look at so many different. How to deduce the law is not too simple. It's not just a matter of what I feel. They also involve reasoning. They also involve so many other sciences to deduce how is this going to help us. Maybe now they say it's not allowed, but then like with the COVID vaccine, I remember at the beginning, I think they were saying no, but then they changed it, So
Okay.
it can evolve, certainly. Yeah.
So there's nothing then like the mark of the beast for Christians in terms of the technology that Islam would say,
Not,
well, we
not that
know
I
where this
know
is going.
of.
Okay.
Yeah, not that I
Interesting.
know of. Yeah.
I want to ask because you do come from a Catholic background. So I'm curious about this because I've noticed this trend this year, especially, and just even in recent weeks, it's gotten more and more and more. And that is the trend of Catholicism and the traditional Catholicism making a huge comeback with celebrities and influencers in the West. And I'm sure you're aware of it with having roots in North America and being in the UK, which is sort of the epicenter, it seems like, of all of the social and religious sort of conflicts and conversations and political conversations. But have you noticed that this trend of celebrities and influencers that are coming back to Jesus? And I mean, in the UK, you have Russell Brand, for example, who was obviously a big partier and many other things in his past. And now he's like the only thing he talks about in recent months on his social media is Jesus. Have you noticed that? What do you think about it? And is there something similar happening in Islam?
Hmm. I have noticed it, not to a big extent, because to be very honest with you, I left social media in 2018 because I
Very
really
smart.
needed to. Yeah, I really needed to focus. Any personal social media, I don't have any of it. But of course, I am aware my husband does still have social media and things like that. Um, the thing is that, again, it's very hard, right, to know motivations, to know why people do what they do. But in Islam, what I have seen, there was actually a big tendency of a lot of people when all these political topics start to occur. A lot of people start selling books about why I left Islam, or why I'm not a Muslim anymore, or
Interesting.
why Islam is this and that. So it's like, I do notice that trend where people that were supposed Muslims leave their religion, and they actually sell a lot of books or podcasts or whatever to say, yeah, Islam is this and that, and then just so they just spit so much hatred, right?
Mhm.
and
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 are
I
they
find
going
that very
secular
interesting.
or are they going to another religion?
Uh, some of them, I don't know names on top of my head, but I remember a couple of them on YouTube that went to Christianity, and others just secular. But the most would be Christianity, like they become Christians, which again, for me, it's like, okay, you are free to do what you want, but I don't understand that having to open up a YouTube channel just to spit hatred
To
about
attack Islam.
Islam, to attack, to write books about it. Like, I personally, that's what really always really made me curious. Like, why do you have to do that? Like, because again, I believe that if you found a religion that really fulfills you, it's going to give you tranquility, peace. It's going to really keep you busy discovering things about that religion and that
Yeah.
compassion. That so that's why it kind of doesn't align with. I don't understand that, it doesn't align with my vision of how why would that happen. But yeah, the trends. I don't know. To me, it's a bit strange when it can always go both ways. Like maybe that the person they do have influence power and they actually did find something good in it and they really want to talk about it and use their influence for it.
Sure.
But more often than not, I don't know. It, to me, feels a bit like why do you have to overdo it sometimes? And
Absolutely. Yeah.
that's the thing. I wouldn't know their motivations, and that's why when I don't understand things like that, I'm like, God, I don't know. As long as they are not saying things that really harm others.
And
Yeah.
that's really at the heart of it. Yeah, it's impossible to know people's motivations. So I don't want to be overly judgmental. I've just noticed this trend of, man, there's a lot of people suddenly, going back to Catholicism, and it's not so much. The interesting thing is that there was sort of a boom in Christianity, not in Catholicism, but in more Protestant Christianity, in the
Mm-hmm.
late
Mm-hmm.
'90s, early 2000s, contemporary
Yeah.
Christian music and all of that. And
Yeah.
then the last 20 years or so, 25 years, there's been a definite falling away and a leaving of the church in America, especially. And now, the last couple of years, it seems like all these people are going back to their roots, but they're not going back to their Protestant roots as much as they're going back to Catholicism in a more
Mm.
traditional way. And the interesting thing to me is that it seems like people are genuinely seeking spirituality, which is that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
People are looking for something that is more rooted in old traditions. They don't want to just go back to the church that they grew up in when they were kids with their parents. They're going back hundreds of years or thousands of years maybe, which is interesting. But then it's also like I get skeptical because of the transhumanist component of it. For example, the Hallow app is the number
Mm-hmm.
one prayer app for Catholics in the world. So that
Mm.
makes it the number one most influential Christian technology on the planet.
Wow.
And
Mm-hmm.
the biggest investment funds who have funded this thing, hundreds of millions of dollars, Peter Thiel and other big VC funds, who have very strong transhumanist leanings. So I'm like, wait a second. Why would someone who doesn't care about the soul at all be investing in this? Yeah, because they think they can make money, but then there's a risk for that. So
Mm-hmm.
I, I,
Mm-hmm.
I won't go off on that tangent, but the question, I guess, is what do you do to ensure that the daily practices that you're doing are focused on? I'm not doing this because it's trendy. I'm not doing it because it's, I feel like I have to do it, but I'm doing it because I genuinely want to know God. And if I am genuinely seeking and I want that relationship, I want that connection with the divine,
Mm-hmm.
I don't need to post about it on social media every 5 minutes because like that's not why I'm
Yeah.
doing it. How can
Yeah.
people and it's a tricky question because yeah, you don't want to judge people's motives, but at the same time, it's like if your purpose is to be a preacher,
Yeah.
that's
Exactly.
one thing. But if
Yeah.
you're doing other things and now you're using your platform or your influence to try and push this and beat people over the head with it,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
where does your
And
deep love come from?
that's a wonderful point you bring because religion will always be used as well as a huge tool for manipulation of the masses in different
Yeah.
ways. Um, and it's clear how, as you mentioned earlier towards the beginning, how each person does have that calling towards to transcend that we all know there's something out there at some level.
Yes.
And it's extremely dangerous when people in power or with wealth or that they don't care about the soul get a hold of that knowledge of understanding that every human, most humans, maybe not them because they maybe overread that for some reason, but will will follow religion or something, they will do something like that to. It's very real. I mean, in every religion I see how it's used as a tool for manipulation. It's very sad. It's extremely sad. But going back to the question, which I think is connected, as I mentioned, I do try to reduce to a large extent my social media exposure, which I said I don't want to completely eliminate it because again, we also need this contact with the world and what's going on and that.
Sure.
So um but yeah, at first when I knew I needed to really focus on my heel and my path, yeah, I didn't look at social media for a good year, like a good solid year,
Wow.
none. Then I started to like just getting the second hand, from my husband or here or there. But now what I do is I tend when I notice my ego starts to act up a little, especially in settings where, let's say, work, right, where that we have a tool like social media, but just for work, where they like put recognitions or this or that, and they put our photos or whatever you do, things like that. So that's where I noticed that, oh, like, wait, this is what the mechanism is. Like, this is meant to throw you there and be like, the ego is like, why are you there? You need to be there. Why didn't you did this? You did this. Why are you, stuff like that. And as soon as I know, a great tool is to start noticing, really, to start noticing, because it all happens very swift, very suddenly. Your ego can start feeding you with information that, why are you left behind? Why are you this? All of those thoughts. I think the most important thing is to notice it. And for that, it took me a few years of meditation, of course, therapy. Like, it doesn't happen overnight, but to be aware of our thoughts can really, really do wonders. Because as soon as I'm aware of a thought that I distinguish, it is my ego, then I move to another technique, which this is a Sufi technique, a spiritual technique, which might sound a bit odd, but I'll say it. You picture yourself in your dying moments, like literally in your deathbed. Like we are all gonna go through that moment. So you envision yourself dying and really questioning, what am I worried about in that moment? Like, really, in my last breaths, am I really worried about this post? Am I really worried about why the likes or how many likes or this or that? So at that moment, I always come to understand that, oof, if I'm dying at that very moment, I just really hope I achieve the grace of God and that I can be in a peaceful place. That would be my only worry, really, because like, what else can worry me at that moment? Maybe for other people it's different, but it works for me to do that. And when I'm too distracted or too worried with other things of this world, then I come back to this practice and I really envision myself passing away and connecting to that worry, which is, I want God to be pleased with me.
That's really interesting. So you mentioned meditation as well. Obviously, awareness is really important, and that's something that I think introspection in general is often lost in our modern society and
Mm-hmm.
just living our lives. So
Mm-hmm.
awareness, meditation, that's not something that I was really familiar with as being a part of Islam. Therapy, um,
Mm-hmm.
and then I imagine prayer as well. So in all of
Mm-hmm.
those things, you sort of combining from a foundation of, I want to use this to be a better person, but also to deepen my connection with God.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, that's correct. So in Islam, we say that everything is allowed unless it's clearly stated it's not allowed. So Islam always encourages a holistic approach to getting close to God because Quran says, God put signs everywhere, like basically in the horizons, within yourself, outside. Like there's always signs for us to get curious and understand so it can help our path. And yeah, I mean, meditation itself, um, Quran says that you can meditate. You know, we all have maybe an idea of meditation, which is like maybe getting into trance or guided meditation, something like that. That's perfectly okay as well. I would do those too, or I would do meditation on the 99 names of Allah, of God, which is like the attributes of God. Like, for example, the most merciful, and then you start thinking in all the mercy around you or all the mercy you have experienced. Maybe the other name, Arauf, which is one of my favorites, which is like the most kind, like the most tenderness you can possibly imagine. So then I picture those moments where maybe I was in a really bad anxiety and something happened. Some stranger talked to me that made me feel good, or just something good that enveloped me in this like tenderness. So you start meditating different ways. There's different ways, but I would combine um, guided meditations, could be through YouTube or whatever else, like um, energy healing, which it helped me a lot to understand, because God clearly also tells us that, you know, the intention. Islam emphasizes a lot on intention, and intention is energy. So your intent is what's going to get things moving or stuck or whatever the case might be. So based on your intent is how you get the you reap what you sow based on the intent, you know. And all of that, of course, I've learned it from Islam, but it has been a holistic approach based on what's allowed. Yeah.
That's really cool. I love the intentionality part because that's so important with everything, but it really gets to the heart of why are you praying? Why are
Mm-hmm.
you going to the mosque or the iglesia
Yeah.
or whatever? Like, why are you doing these things, saying these things? And then to, with that intentionality, to focus on the names of God.
Mm-hmm.
That's really,
Mm-hmm.
really cool because then it just brings a very clear focus. I mean that's not something I'm gonna have to ask some people from other faiths about that specific. I'm gonna add that to my questions. It's really interesting because yeah,
Yeah.
there are, and in Islam there are so many names for God, right? And that's one of
Yeah.
the things that in Sufi there's like the,
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember what it's called, the name of it. You probably know what it is, but where like they're moving their heads and saying the name of God, and it becomes like a trance sort of thing in a group.
Yeah. 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 To
Not
be honest, I
Sam
forgot.
Sama, but
Yeah.
Sama's like
Yeah.
the music and the dance. I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah. See, all of those which to be honest I've only attended I think three in all this time. Again, these are not mandatory, but these help especially when you
with
live in a
intentionality.
community. Yeah, with intentionality, with the community when they do it. When I used to live in San Diego, there was a Sufi community in LA, so I would try to go because in San Diego we didn't really have it. So I would try to go to LA at least once a month, and it's with that intention. It's, okay, why am I going? Why am I going to drive through that traffic 2 hours or 3 hours?
Yeah,
Why, and and you believe it or not, many people will have different intentions. So that's why you need to, the more clear you get with your intentions. So sometimes I want to do something, and my first thought is like, oh yeah, I want to do it because it's good or because I want to feel close to God. But then something doesn't feel completely clear in me, so I start asking more to myself, like, is that really all the case? And then some other motive comes. Oh no, like I wanna be seen, or I want to be this. I mean, which is not always bad, but you need to really, the more you ask, the more clear your intention is, the better the results you get, the more powerful um, your experience will be when it's more connected to God.
definitely. I want to ask you one more question. Um, and this is for people who are Muslim, people who believe sort of have the same framework as you, and also for people of other faiths. what would you say is the most important thing? So if someone is really interested in becoming more intentional with their faith and getting close to God, not so much about the religious aspect, but they want to know God on a deeper level. What is something you would say for the next 30 days if they will take this approach, do this thing, apply this, think this way, whatever it is for you? What would you say is like something that start here in
Mm-hmm.
order to get closer to God over, and this is a great time because I'm not sure when I'll get this published, but it's
Mm-hmm.
going to be the first week of the year for sure in January.
Yeah.
So what's something that people can do to get deeper into knowing themselves and connecting with God on a daily basis?
You know, I will tell you something that, of course, really works for me, and I believe, and I would hope it could work for many people. Always with a caveat that every person's journey is very individual, and we all need to find our own way of doing things. But something that I didn't know other people don't really do, and I found out like not long ago, is that conversation with God. For some reason, I believe that most people have that conversation with God, like a give and take. Like maybe if I'm washing dishes or cleaning or something, like, oh God, like, why am I feeling sad, or why this, or why that, or thank you for this, or thank you. Like I talk to God very often in this conversation way. And I asked a couple of friends, no, like, do you talk to God? They're like, no, not really. So it made me think that maybe it's not so common, or maybe people don't do it. So in case people don't really do it, I would like to say that that's something that has helped me a lot, because you keep that awareness, and I do get answers. We get answers when we ask, whether that is God, the universe, whatever people believe in. But God is ever present, right? So it's, again, the Quran truly emphasizes on asking, because he listens. So there was a time or period of my life where I would think, oh, why do I even have to ask God if he knows everything I'm thinking, he knows everything I need, he knows everything. Why do I have to even say it? So I went through a period of my life where I wouldn't really ask. I would just do my prayers and not even really have that conversation. But I noticed I started to feel a bit empty. And it was not until I reinstated that conversation, like as if, yeah, you're listening. It's like a conviction that you are listening, because that's what you're saying. You say in the Quran you're listening. I understand, my thoughts and my needs and everything, but I still want to talk to you. And I think
Mm.
that mechanism, even if a person is not used to it, maybe start with, I don't know, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, whatever it is. It's like any habit, right?
Yeah.
So it's a build up. So for me now, it's like a very common thing to do. But if someone wants to get closer to God and to get answers, I think that would be a great way.
And how do you know that when you're receiving messages? My mom
Mm.
always talks about, she used to say that God sent me a fax, or now it's I'm getting a download from God. How do you know when you're hearing God versus your own mind answering? It's like, God, I really want a Lamborghini. Okay, Joshua, I'm going to give you a Lamborghini. Like, okay, obviously that's me just making that up. How do you know when it's the voice of God really speaking to you? Is it something you feel in your heart, or is it?
Yeah, now it's more clear. But again, it was not always like this, because
Mm.
it becomes more clear the more you heal your own wounds or trauma or things like that. So now it is more clear, where I can more easily distinguish it. Sometimes it's more like a thought, but that's not the type of thoughts you have. So it's like a thought that's just implanted there. Other times it could just come through a person, a book, uh, literally anyone, um, a colleague, my manager. It could be anyone that maybe I had a question, today, and I ask God like, oh, I don't understand this. Can you help me understand it? And then next day or 2 days or a week from now, someone is telling me that, and it resonates deeply. So that's how I know it comes, that answer is, from God, because it really resonates deeply. So or it could be a book, again, it could be different ways, a dream perhaps. In the past I was not good with like dreams, meaning good as in like I would just dismiss them because I had no clue. But now, slowly, I noticed, okay, I have a question, and then this dream came. Okay, let me try to ponder a little bit, and then if I connect to some message that I find relevant to my question, then yeah, then I understand it's like that.
So, in asking those questions, there may not be an immediate answer, but there are synchronicities in life, or there are answers that come that that's not a coincidence, because I just asked God that question yesterday, and now look, like this person is basically answering
Yeah.
in their own human way, but I know that that's coming from God.
Absolutely, Josh. And or even getting triggered. In Sufism, the big part is your triggers are messengers. So yeah, anything that triggers us, it could be something a person said and you feel upset, or you feel less than, or you feel insulted, whatever it is. Any trigger contains information as to what happened there that this is triggering me, and it's worth analyzing, not maybe not too deeply for some people, but so I have gotten a lot of answers through my triggers as well, so I think that's also a way.
And that goes back to the awareness, right? Of being aware of your thoughts and your feelings, and being intentional with that relationship. That's really insightful. Really
Yes,
good stuff. I appreciate it. Um,
thank you, Josh.
no, thank you so much for taking the time and having this conversation. It was really interesting, and it
Thank you.
inspires me to want to look deeper, as I have been, but it inspires me to want to look even deeper into Sufism and Islam in general, because there's a lot that I've learned that I didn't realize. I had my own preconceived notions as well of what this is, a political, religious ideology, etc.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
that's part of the benefit of having these types of conversations too, is like there's so much that we can all learn and realize we're all seeking God. We don't have to just create these artificial divisions and barriers and whatnot. And
Yeah.
as we are genuine, as you are genuine in your faith, you inspire me to be genuine in my faith and other people in theirs. And that's what I think we should all be doing, even if we are doing that in a different structure. So thanks for being
Absolutely.
willing to have the
Thank you,
conversation.
Josh, for this space. I really love these conversations, are extremely important, and I hope we can have them more often in our societies to help us. Yeah.